Hello, hello? Is it working? Hello, hello? I think it's working.
Beat me.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good.
Am I on the right side? Did they switch us? Nope. Good.
I know, sometimes they switch us around.
Yeah.
Well, at least I moved a few seats.
Trevor and I switched for my first few weeks, but
Order, please. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Just a quick reminder that we are still in a situation where we're asking people to mask indoors in all of our buildings. So please, if you have your mask with you, thank you for wearing them. This brings us immediately to the public comment section of the agenda. We do have one person who has signed up to address the board. Please come forward to one of the microphones, whichever is closest to you. Identify yourself by name and town, and then please deliver your remarks. I'm sorry? Oh, okay. In that case, we will move on to the next portion of the agenda, which is the report of the secretary. May I please have a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, November 17th, 2021.
That's Jen.
Second, Heather?
Heather, thank you. Comments? There's a lot of information in these.
Number, under report of the superintendent, number 2. Second line at the end, it says, any student athlete that was going to wrestle, they were required, hold on. It initially recommended that any student athlete that was going to wrestle, they were required to be vaccinated. I think take out they there, or were required or was required.
Yep.
And then, nope, sorry.
It's okay. Anybody have anything else?
Great job.
Okay, let's proceed to a vote then. All in favor? That is 5-0, thank you. And that brings us to the report of the chair. The only item I have on the agenda tonight is that our next town officials meeting will be on December 8th. That's next Wednesday. 9:30, it will be remote. That'll be a chance to meet the new town manager in South Berwick, which will be cool. So we want to keep the number of board members to 3 or below, so please coordinate with me, and we'll figure out who's going to attend. Thank you. And that brings us to the report of the superintendent.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Tonight, we wanted to start off with a presentation of our elementary school achievement data. Our elementary, or actually all of our students who were required to, just took the NWEA, which is kind of the new state assessment. This is a change in the assessment system from what it had been for a number of years, which obviously creates a new set of data and a different way to look at data. One of the unique things about the NWEA is that it's given twice, and so it's actually a growth tool. So you can measure individual students' growth over the course of the year. So this initial work is really going to give us kind of a snapshot of where kids are, and then obviously in April and May, when we take the second round, that will show the growth of the child over the course of the year. So typically takes about 3 years to be able to track data on a set assessment to be able to really see trends. And so Heidi is here tonight, and Melanie Dodge to be able to share some data with us.
This one on? Okay, great. So yeah, I'm going to share a little bit of data, as John mentioned. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of context about where we are with the state assessment picture in Maine right now. It's significantly different than it was a few years ago. What do I do, David? The big button? Oh, there we go. So prior to the pandemic, we were using a state test called Empower. We'd had that test in place for about 5 years. The state decided they no longer wanted to use the Empower test and wanted to develop a new assessment. There's a statewide group of people, I'm involved in it, many other people are involved in it across the state, building a new assessment kind of from the ground up. Jeanette Kirk, who is the Department of Ed standards kind of guru who's in charge of the assessment project, predicts it's going to be about a 5 to 6 year project to get a new state assessment developed. So in order to meet federal guidelines that say we have to have a state test in place, the state of Maine applied for a waiver from the federal government to use the NWEA as an interim measure. And they have to apply for that on, they can get the waiver for 2-year chunks. And we also have, so consequently, we have 2-year contracts at the state level with NWEA. So right now, we're in year 2 of our 2-year contract. We used it for the first time last spring. That was just to like shake the dust out. Many people across the state took it remotely, but we got it off the ground. And this fall will be kind of a full implementation where we give the test in the fall. There's an optional administration in the winter, and then another required administration in the spring. Jeanette said, like I said, that's likely to be extended for a couple more contracts, and so we'll probably be using this for about 5 or 6 years. There was no state test given in 2019 due to COVID, and the NWEA, like I said, was given for the first time last spring, but participation rates were not great. There was really no baseline setting. So we're really kind of looking at this fall, and then it's given in the same grades we've always given it in, 3 through 8 and 11. So I think what the biggest thing that's important to understand about NWEA is it's not actually an achievement test. It's a formative norm reference test. So when you look at standardized testing, there's 2 categories that a standardized test can fall in. They can either be norm referenced or criterion referenced. State tests are typically criterion referenced. They're designed to measure student achievement against a set of standards. So we have our state standards. The test is developed to measure those standards. Kids take it, and we get a proficiency measurement. That is not what the NWEA is designed to do. It's a norm reference test, so it reports out scores based on a percentile, a national percentile. And NWEA does norming studies every 3 to 5 years. Their most recent norming study was done in 2020 based on pre-pandemic data. So it's very interesting because the national norms that are set right now, I'm not sure how accurate they are because they don't reflect the pandemic. So I'm guessing they're probably going to re-norm sooner than later. The other thing that's really interesting about the data I'm going to share is that because of the fact that NWEA is norm referenced, and there's no linking study that's been done between our state standards and the NWEA, there are no proficiency benchmarks right now. Like, the state hasn't said you need X score to be considered proficient or X score to be considered, exceeds. There isn't any of that done yet. That's the work they're doing right now. I don't know when it will be done. So it's just important to understand that what we can learn from NWEA is not the same as what we could learn from previous MEA tests that we used. So the good news is the NWEA actually does a lot of things for us that our previous state tests were unable to do. It is a well-established national test that a lot of schools use in a formative way. We used to use it prior to using the STAR assessment, which is the one we've been using for many, many years, as a formative measure as it was designed to be used to inform teachers about student student progress in their classroom. The great thing about it is the data's available immediately. So student can take a test on Monday, teacher can look at how their class did on Tuesday, and use that data and all the tools that come with the system to plan instruction. That's awesome, and that's the best win, I think, about this whole thing. The teachers like it because it answers that question, where are our kids right now and what do they need next? And so that's really useful when you're comparing it to our previous system where kids would take a test in, say, March or April. We wouldn't get the results of that test until the following fall. By the time the teachers got that data back, they didn't even have those kids anymore. So that's a big switch that I think is a positive thing. The other thing I think is really positive is that last bullet. NWEA has a growth measure attached to it, which is why we have to give it twice. We look at fall and spring, and then once we have 2 testing points, we'll be able to get a growth measure that's also nationally normed, so we'll be able to tell if our students are growing as fast or more quickly or less quickly than other students around the country, which can be really helpful to have. So because this is not a traditional achievement test that has proficiency benchmarks set, what we report on, what we look at is performance in quintiles. So they take student achievement and they basically cut it into 5 chunks. And they say, you know, your bottom 20% is your low. You know, you can read that. Essentially what it does for us as instructors is we're able to say those students that are in the yellow, green, and blue categories are considered to be kind of on or above grade level. They're kind of where they should be. Students in the orange and red categories are those students we're looking at for extra intervention. You know, they're getting maybe reading intervention, or they're getting some math intervention, getting a little extra attention from the teacher, those sorts of things. So in that way, it's very helpful to teachers because they can look at their class and those kids kind of are put into categories and then they know which instructional groups they need to work with. So this is the first little piece of data that we have. So what I chose to capture in this chart is the percent of students in each grade who fell into the yellow, green, or blue categories, those students that were above the 40th percentile when you look at those national norms. So again, these scores don't reflect how many kids met the state standards, because that's not what this test is designed to do. It just gives you a sense of sort of how many of our students or what percentage of our students are kind of on grade level or above grade level based on this assessment. So as you can see, our literacy scores are really pretty strong. The math scores are weaker than the literacy scores, which I think we knew going in. Mel's going to talk a little bit about that when she comes up to share some of the data work. But as you guys know, prior to the pandemic, we went through a rigorous process to adopt a new elementary school math program. That has been rolled out over last year and this year. We now have all of our grades 1 through 5 using the new program. And we were able to, prior to the pandemic, put some additional intervention resources in place, which we've really just been able to deploy this year. So for the first time ever, for example, Central School has a math interventionist, which they didn't have before. And we've also invested heavily at Elliott Elementary, and we're beginning to make that same investment at Central around a program called AVMR, which is called Math Recovery. And it's a really cool intervention and instructional program that really helps teachers understand how kids learn math and looks diagnostically at where kids are getting stuck and what gaps they need to fill next. And so that work is super exciting. Mel went through the training a couple weeks ago, so she can speak to that probably more eloquently than I can. So that's kind of just the first snapshot. So what we'll do, this is the fall scores from this year. In the winter, there's an optional testing window. So we will encourage teachers to give the test again in the winter. It's a nice dipstick to see how kids are progressing. And then we'll have another required administration in May. And I'd love to come back and talk to you guys in June and share that growth data with you, because I think that's going to be particularly interesting to look at coming out of a pandemic and seeing how our students respond, particularly the kids that were entirely remote last year, which about 20 to 25% of our kids were. So that's that. I did also want to mention that we had a new science assessment that was given last year for the first time. Several years ago, we started the work of transitioning to the next generation science standards in Maine. The state developed a new science assessment, and that was given last spring for the first time as an online administration. Still given in grades 5, 8, and 11. And I was able to watch some students take it and talk to some teachers after the fact, and it was very positive. There are no benchmarks yet, so all their state is reporting is participation rates at this point, because they're still standard setting with the new assessment. So it won't be until this spring that we have any actual performance data from our kids.
Can I ask a quick question? Is the state interested in collecting any data as far as like who was remote? Or are they looking at the remote factor statewide?
I don't know the answer to that. I am interested in it. Mel is interested. We've been tracking that on our own data walls internally as we look at kids and look at remediation, and our coaching group has had that conversation about, are we seeing more remote kids that need extra remediation, or is it pretty balanced?
Okay, just curious.
It's a great question.
Thank you.
It's funny with the remote piece, Heidi shared a quick little excerpt with me this morning, but things that they're seeing is that kids aren't even used to writing. I mean, so they're more used to on the touchscreen, on the iPad, they haven't had to physically write, as much. I mean, obviously they have, but not quite as much. So it's just very interesting, kind of some of these things that you kind of see over time that are rearing themselves, so.
Even just using scissors or gripping a pencil, because they haven't been having to do that so much, right?
Yeah, interesting.
So there's some pretty interesting, unique challenges that we're seeing right now with kids. So I came to this meeting with some data to share with you with a little bit of trepidation, because whenever we talk about data, it makes us nervous and it makes us want to we've got to, pedal faster. And yes, we do, because our kids need that, but we have to remember that we committed to connections before content because we believe that that's what's right for kids, and that first we need them to feel safe and feel protected and feel connected to their community, and then we can build on that foundation, which is what this is all about, providing their physiological safety and their sense of belonging so that we can get the best work we can out of them. One thing that I'm particularly interested in right now is figuring out how to get some data about how our kids are doing in terms of their social emotional learning and development. I hear a lot of anecdotes from teachers about kids' behavior being off the wall, or them not knowing how to interact socially, or struggling from a mental health perspective, but we don't have any real data to look at. We're operating from a place of sort of observations and assumptions. So that's some things I've been thinking a lot about, is how can we gather some of that data. There's some really good survey tools out there. The folks at Great Works developed a nice rubric to help their intervention team talk about where kids are in terms of their social emotional development. We have been looking at some behavioral data and some attendance data. But I think this is a question that I'm hearing statewide from other curriculum directors, is how do we get our arms around where kids are with their social emotional development and have that data so that we can better serve them. So I don't have an answer. That's just a question. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mel and let her talk to you guys a little bit about the sort of day-to-day ways that our elementary school teachers are using student data and how they're going to use that data to help kids rebound from this whole thing.
Hi, thank you. My name's Melanie Dodge. I am the elementary mathematics coach. And so I get the privilege of watching kids grow all the way from little 4-year-olds at Elliott and Central all the way to 5th graders in Great Works. And I say it's a privilege because it really is an honor to see that tremendous growth that they make in that time. And so the next question is, how do teachers actually use data? And what kind of data do we track? What kind of data are we assessing regularly? And how are we triangulating that data with kind of those bigger pieces like the STAR and the NEWA? And the question's all about, how can we use information about our students to inform our instruction? And particularly this year, when we're in the midst of a once-in-a-century pandemic, how do we focus on student growth? How do we track that growth when kids are all over the place? When you walk into a classroom now, you're walking into a place where you have kids that are pretty much 4 grade levels above and below each other in any given classroom. And so because kids are all over the place, our focus this year is really on their growth. How are they growing? What are we doing? What decisions are we making in the classroom with our teams and our PLCs? What instructional decisions are we making? What opportunities are we providing for students to help them grow? And so our data wall tools that we have our reading benchmark and assessment data, and that comes from our Fontes and Pinnell instructional tool and assessment tool. And for this year, what's really exciting, we have a brand new math benchmark tool, which comes directly from Math Recovery, which we have been trialing for a few years in Elliott, and have seen some really good gains, some great growth in that area. So I'm going to show you that in a moment. And then the future, as Heidi had kind of alluded to, is the next piece of the puzzle, right, is not just our academic growth, but is our social emotional growth. And how do we know where our kids are? How do we track that? And how do we give them everything they need to be successful in the classroom? And so we'll open up those data walls. He knows. And so what I wanted to show you here is just a sample of one. And this is kind of, this is mostly from prior years, because I wanted to show you what does it look like over the course of a year. And so you can see here where it starts with the first column, we have the student name, we have their teacher, and you can see there's multiple teachers here. So this is a sampling, this is actual data, just the names have been removed. And you can see we're tracking things. We want to know things about our students. Are they receiving reading intervention? Did they get to go to Summer Boost? Are they receiving special educational services? And that big question, were they remote last year? Right? And that is something that we're keeping on our data walls, right front and center. And then we get into our benchmark reading data. Where are our students in the fall? And you can see it's color-coded based on where we expect them to be. And the big change when we're looking at our data this year versus years in the past is we're really going to focus on that growth goal. Because students may need to be at a level, let's say, M at the end of the school year, but if they started, but the question is really, where did they start? And so if we're really looking at growth, we want them to make about a year's growth or more. And so that's what we're really looking at this year. And so if you look at the fall, if we just look at that one student, they were at a level H. And so that growth goal, by the end of the year, we would like it to be an L. And you can see that they grew, and they grew, and as you see their colors, they didn't meet the benchmark. They're not in green in the spring. So they've not met that grade level benchmark, but look at their growth. How exciting is that? Their growth goal was an L, and they exceeded that growth goal. And you can see other students that maybe didn't meet their growth goal, but they might have started higher, in a higher grade level than even most of their peers. And so their growth isn't going to necessarily be a full year because they started so much higher than their peers. And so what this allows us to do is group our students and say, okay, I have these 3 students, you have these 2 students, they're clearly struggling on the same things. What can we do? And this is where that PLC time every Thursday is so important. Because without that time, we cannot talk about our students. We can't talk about our instructional decisions. And so all of this works together to create wonderful opportunities for our students because our teachers have some great tools in their hand. Now, as David goes over to our math intervention, I think it says new on it, this is really exciting. Maybe. Oh, yeah, okay, so on the bottom tabs, yep, there we go. Yeah, math intervention. It's just being slow. Try to click a different tab. Sorry, I'm not talking into the microphone. Hey. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so this is so exciting. Now, when we were looking at some of that fall data, when you're looking at some of that NEWA data, and we looked at Central, and we looked at how their math scores were not as high as Elliott's scores. And one of those reasons is because for the last 2 years, Elliott has had math intervention services for students who are struggling, and Central has not. However, that changed this year because of you, because of money you put into the budget to support struggling students. And this is our data from the end of our first math cycle at Central. And what's so exciting about this is you can see where students were in the beginning in their number ID, in their forward and backward number counting, in their structuring of number, in their addition and subtraction, their conceptual place value, their multiplication and division, and their total benchmark score. And then you can see their scores for the end of cycle 1. And then the last columns are the growth. And if you look at that growth, every one of those students in that short 6-week cycle made growth. And some of them made pretty incredible growth, with just having that extra opportunity 4 days a week to work exactly at that level that they need with that math interventionist. And so it's really exciting to see how something that we've been practicing and trying in one school, and now that we've rolled out to the other schools. Great Works also has math interventionists, and we're working on the data right now for that. But you can see when you put people who know students, when you put people with great math tools and some great learning, all of the interventionists are learning from Devin Weber, our math interventionist specialist at Elliott, so that we are all on the same page. We are all doing the same thing. It's really exciting, and it's fair, because all students are given the opportunities and the additional opportunities that they need, especially this year, and probably for the next few years as well. And so the data walls just help us have conversations about our students. Sometimes we look at the data walls in our PLCs, sometimes we bring our student work, but we're always talking about our students, where they are, the growth they've made, and where we want them to be. Any questions about the data walls? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
you.
That's great to see.
So as Heidi said, we'd like to come back in the spring, once we do the second assessment, to be able to kind of show that growth data. And so, for example, Heidi's meeting with a group of teachers tomorrow to say, look, this is the NWA data, this is how you can access it, and then this is how you can use it. And so to be able to, this new tool to be able to kind of get the instantaneous feedback on children is just huge, so.
That's great. Yeah,
Perfect.
awesome. Can I just make just one suggestion in regards to the NEWAs? And I realize that you need more data points in order to, give a nice picture. But just to have it more readily available to parents, I found, just as a parent myself in the district, just having to track down test scores for my children. So I actually used NEWAs when I was in the classroom, and every fall and spring we would present the data to the parents at parent-teacher conference. And they have some really great graphs and summaries that, are made for parents.
Yep.
And it's just nice to have, especially if the explanation is provided, where I'm sure Heidi could give the explanation to the teachers so that the actual classroom teacher could iterate exactly what the parent is looking at.
Perfect.
Because it's just one test, obviously, it's just one point in time. But I find with the NEWA scores, when I was teaching, is that to assign appropriate reading level, reading material to my students is super helpful. And I think that, as parents, we can use that information, go to the library or go to the bookstore to get those correct reading level
Yeah.
books.
100%, yeah. We actually had that conversation Monday at our EAT meeting, discussing how we were going to share that information with parents, because, it is, the initial rollout, and so we want to make sure that we have some consistency amongst the buildings, so absolutely. So 100% hear that feedback.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. Just a couple of quick things on the COVID situation. I just wanted to share with you, we had about a 20% of our students in the elementary schools who took part in the vaccination clinics that we held prior to the Thanksgiving break on that Monday and Tuesday, so around 20% roughly speaking. And then just, we have put out the winter athletics kind of expectations. One of the things that we've had to do, similar to what we had to do with the district musical, which was unbelievable, by the way, just wonderful to see the musical. But we are going to have to limit the space in the gymnasium just to be able to have social distancing. And so our capacity is right around, I think, 1,200 in that gymnasium. And so I'm not sure if it's going to be 600, but we are going to spread people out in order just to meet the social distancing expectations that the CDC has. And so obviously families can sit together, but we just need to be mindful of that. And typically it's not an issue during the winter time, but there are a couple of games that you might circle and say, typically these have been some pretty big crowds, and how do we manage that? So we just want to make sure we're communicating that. Mr. Buzzell's put together a sheet to kind of explain kind of what the expectations would be, and also going to share that with our middle school. So for example, some of the things that have kind of come up over the course of the year is just, will there be availability for locker rooms for opposing teams? Do you do a handshake at the end of the games? Those types of things. So we have common expectations across the county. Is really important for us to do. So they're working on that. Mr. Buzzell has a meeting tomorrow, where that will be established, and then that will be shared with the middle school. So everybody's just aware of that. Any questions, COVID related? Okay, perfect. And then the last thing is a revenue anticipation note. And so, as you are aware, when we took the federal funds, we needed to pay that money out and then, spend down our fund balance to be able to do that. And so, I asked Ryan to kind of share with us right now. In the springtime, we had to take a defined note out, and this is really a note asking for the flexibility if we need to borrow the money. We don't want to, but just in the event that we need to, depending on how quickly the money comes in. And Ryan's going to be able to give you a snapshot of why we're asking and kind of what it means. So I'm going to have Ryan be able to present that.
Good evening. Just to kind of go back, there should be a graph in your folders. Exactly, Mr. Long's holding it up. And kind of just to kind of go back to a few years ago, 2016, 2017, and just talking about fund balance. So when we're talking about borrowing money, we're talking about cash. But really, it goes hand in hand with what we have fund balance. It's what Mr. Caverly likes to call our savings account. And back in 2016-17, we had about $2.6 million is what our fund balance was. And during that year, we also had a significant capital reserve. We had moved $600,000 to a capital reserve, so that was additional cash that we had on hand. And in that year, we had a pretty significant food service deficit. We paid off $400,000 to a food service deficit that year as well, and still ended with $2.6 million. For the following 3 years, we put about $2.6 million as a use of fund balance, $870,000 a year. That was under the prior administration, and it was an attempt to kind of hold to basically a cap on how high expenditures would go and how high of a tax increase we would go. That kind of, I think, was a little bit outdated as far as We used to be a 50% receiver from the state, so we'd get kind of 50% of our cash or our subsidy would come in from the state, and then the other 50% would kind of get paid by taxes. That fraction has changed significantly over the last several years. So we were using fund balance to try to prop up the, so we wouldn't have to ask for such a large tax increase. 2 years ago, when we did the budget, you know, I talked to Mr. Caverly, and we really tried to push that number down. So we went from an $870,000 ask from the fund balance down to a $500,000. And really, at the end of a typical year, we have about $500,000 of expenditures that we don't expend because we have to have a little bit of room in the budget for emergencies. And we kind of just rotate that forward for the following year. So we've done that the last 2 years. This year, we got an additional $1.1 million in subsidy. And we went to the board and we asked to make some expenditures to pay off some long-term leases, which would provide us savings and interest and also future budgetary costs. We did not allocate about $500,000 of that. So when we end 2022, when we get to the end of 2022, our fund balance will be back up to 2.2 million. So we dropped, I think our low point is going to be about 1.7 million, but in the span of about 5 years, we're going to get our fund balance back up to about $2.2 million, which is kind of where we want it to be. There's a threshold that was set by the board many years ago for 6% of total expenditures. If you look at the dotted line on the graph, that's kind of what that represents going through the years. You can see in the last couple of years, we've kind of dipped below that. And I kind of put an arrow on that graph saying this is kind of where we are right now. This is why we're asking to be able to borrow some money, to be able to potentially make some expenditures if we need to. I'm not 100% sure if we're going to have to borrow that money or not. If we don't borrow that money, as Mr. Caverly said, we don't pay any interest on it. It's just there, it's available for us. It's really going to depend, and I told Mr. Caverly that it's kind of dependent on the holidays. I get a little bit nervous. Our checks from the towns are due on the 20th, but sometimes with the holidays, if those come in late, we just don't want to be able to like not make payroll because the check came in late or the mail's slow because of the holidays or whatever. So we just want the money available, but it's not necessarily like we're going to have to borrow it. So the other piece that's kind of exacerbating our need for cash is our federal grants. So we have 3 additional federal grants this year, the ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. And the way those federal grants work is we have to spend the money, and then we can request reimbursement from the state. That process takes time, so we've spent money out every month, and then we're waiting for the money to come back in. Currently, our receivables for those 3 ESSER grants are in excess of $400,000. Our local entitlement, our special education grant, switched from the old GEM system to a new, it's called Grants for Me. That process has caused some confusion in getting all the approvals completed. So we have receivables for that grant, which we typically don't have, of about $100,000. As you're all aware, there was a mold issue at the middle school and at the Great Works School. We're still waiting to hear back from the insurance company of whether those would be covered. The cost associated with that is in excess of $250,000. And we also have some window replacements that we're going to start financing at the middle school as well. That will be a little over $100,000. The new CDS preschool program we have is, again, that's a new program we're doing for 3-year-olds at the Elliott Elementary School. That includes payroll for staff, contractor reimbursements for professional services, and transportation services. All of those, again, have to be paid by us, and then we can request reimbursement through CDS. So we currently have outstanding receivables from that of about $50,000. So it's just the timing of when all this money has to be spent and then collected and cash flow wise. I just, again, this is just kind of like we need that kind of in our back pocket so we're able to make payrolls. The last thing that's kind of weird that's happened the last 2 years, and this should be the final year and then it'll kind of switch back to the way it was, is our 3 payroll months typically had come, we'd have one in the summer and then there'd be one in the spring. The last 2 years, we've had one in the summer and then a second one in December. So it's just the timing of when those 3 payroll months happen. So our large monthly revenues like state subsidy, town tax collections, they're spread evenly throughout the year. So on a normal month when we have 2 payrolls, we bring in a little bit more money than we spend, but on a 3 payroll month, we spend more than we bring in. And when those both happen in the first 6 months of the year, it kind of creates a cash shortfall until the rest of the months happen. So kind of all of these things added together, plus our lower fund balance total, has kind of caused this cash flow issue. But with our planned adding of the $500,000 fund balance to the $2.2 million, and potentially the expiration of some of these federal grants, I don't anticipate this being a problem moving forward, but it's just kind of like a temporary thing that's happening right now. Are there any questions on that?
I'm sorry, did you say it was $250,000 to abate the mold?
Yes.
Wow.
So Ryan, I'm viewing this as essentially a line of credit that would allow us to ride over delinquent receivables.
Absolutely right.
Yeah,
But it basically just, like you said, and we don't pay interest on it unless we borrow against it. So
Yeah.
it's there, it's available to us. If we needed to borrow it, we can. If the cash flow comes back in the following month, we can pay it off right then. There's no early payoff penalties or anything like that. So we only accrue interest when there's a balance borrowed outstanding.
and should we expect as a board that if you have to invoke this mechanism, that you'd come to us to let us know?
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions?
No, that was just a lot of information.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm able to comprehend.
So ultimately, there's a lot of money that's owed to us right now from different areas. We're waiting for that money. We have a 3 payroll month, and so this is not necessarily, it's not a spending issue, it's just a matter of the cash flow issue right now. We think we'll be fine, but just we would rather be safe than sorry to have that line of credit with nothing gained, nothing lost. We have the security there just in the event that things don't come in time, so that we're able to manage it that way. So. And as you can see, this is why we really kept talking about the $370,000, the $500,000, taking that money out of the fund balance. We want to keep that up above that $2 million mark so this doesn't happen. And so that's what, that's our plan going forward. So.
And it goes right back if we don't use it.
That's correct. Yeah,
Like-
we don't take anything if we don't use it. There's no charge.
What you draw that gets.
Yep. So. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one quick note. I did get an email from our state representatives. I think we all were on that email, and just what I will be doing is just sending a kind of an email to people just asking about doing a workshop where we can sit down with the local representatives. They asked us to meet with us. So I'm not sure if everybody got that email yesterday.
Yes.
But just so, but we'll be sending that out, and I'll respond to them tomorrow.
Excellent.
Okay, and that concludes my report. I would go to the students.
Okay, so in student government, we're currently working on 2 things. One of this includes kind of like a mental health survey for all different grades. We're kind of focusing on the idea of the effects of COVID and how it changed from before and after, and just like participation in class and stuff like that. And the second thing is kind of the idea of finding a purpose for Hawk Block. So we're trying to, I think it was a couple weeks ago, we did like this 3-section thing, which incorporated the play and this African-American man who sang to us and like kind of taught his culture. And we're trying to reenact that, but having more like mental health ideas, and it'd be student run and just be switching between activities and just stuff like that, which will kind of fill the Hawk Block and kind of create a purpose. I think we're trying to plan for a day in January, but it's just right now just up in the air. And then lastly, one thing we're trying to do in student gov is try to get more participation, especially from the sophomore and freshman class. I think right now we have 20 kids, and I think of that, I think it's 18 are juniors and seniors, so we're kind of lacking that sophomore and freshman voice. So one plan we had was walk around during advisory and kind of just talk about student gov and try to get the word out there, because I think that's the main problem, is just no one knows about student gov in our Monday meetings. And yeah.
Especially with COVID, they probably just, it's not even on their radar that it exists or what it is. Yeah. Adding on to student gov, I spoke with Mr. Scully today, and we are planning to schedule our next meeting with myself, Trevor, and Addie Fuller to just do a check-in and see if we're going to be moving forward on any of the stuff we brought him 2-3 weeks ago. As for non-student gov related things, the football team won states 14-13. Cameron Cornett was nominated for the football Travie Award, and Connor Sullivan was nominated for the soccer Travie Award. Girls basketball scrimmaged against Dover last night, and all winter sports teams have begun practicing and are preparing for a great season. Civil rights team recently, at our last meeting actually, split up into 3 different committees that we're going to try and work out. We haven't really done that before, and they will be focused on policy, where we'll just delve deep into civil rights related school policies. Decor, we want to spread more welcoming messages around the halls. We have a really big banner we're working on right now that we plan to put near the lobby. And calendar, that will be something that the staff will receive. It'll be, it'll have like what the month is and holidays that we don't normally talk about, but that should be recognized. So that, and CRT will have a combined GSA meeting on next Tuesday, so we can, because GSA has also been looking at the school board's transgender policy. So we're going to be discussing policy at our next meeting for civil rights. And lastly, today's Hawk Block was very fun. I got a lot of positive comments about it. It was focused around the importance of a person's identity. Students made feathers and were asked to draw or write 3 or more things about themselves that were important to them personally. And it was just fantastic feedback. I have mine just to give you all a look, because I talk about a lot of stuff, but I don't get to show you exactly what it is, and this was a good opportunity if you wanted to take a look. But yeah, today's Hawk Block was a lot of fun, and I got a ton of positive feedback about it.
So is it like feather in your cap kind of thing?
No, I think the plan is to put them on the doors and kind of make like a hawk out of them. Yeah.
That's cute.
Yeah. It was, I heard from not just my advisory, but several others that it was a great activity and it got kids talking about themselves, which was a very big improvement for Hawk Block, I think.
And just for clarity, when we talk about, or when Annabelle just talked about the CRT, that's the civil rights team. That's what the kids refer to the civil rights team as.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
And I believe we are going to be coming up with a presentation to share as a civil rights team in the coming weeks.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, I'd love to see.
So great.
The great thing again about the civil rights team is that's an established program through the state of Maine and through the Attorney General's office that was established a number of years ago. So
Yeah.
I believe it's the 6 protected categories.
Exactly, yes.
Yep, perfect.
That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
for your report.
Can I just add real quick that to get back to the football state championship, it seems to be raining state championships around here
Yes.
lately. Congratulations to all of the athletes and to Rich and everybody, all the coaches.
It is a rare feat when two teams within the same season win a state championship, particularly in a smaller school. That's a pretty
Sure.
incredible feat
Yes, it
amongst
is.
having some great seasons, a bunch of all of our teams. So.
That's awesome.
Perfect. That concludes my report.
Okay, that brings us to the correspondence section of the agenda. We did get a letter, and by we I mean Superintendent Carverly and myself as the chair, from our 2 state representatives, Representatives Meyer and Roberts, expressing concerns about incidents lately with regard to bullying, but also expressing support for the district and the approach that is being taken. And finally offering their services as state legislators to help in any way that they can. It was really an awesome letter, very supportive, and we were grateful to get it. Mr. Carverly composed a response to them that expressed that gratitude to them. Okay, anything you wanted to add to that?
No.
Okay, good, excellent, all right. That brings us then to the report of the committees. We did miss our finance and facilities last week because of a joint workshop with the Rollinsford Board. Our next meeting therefore will be on the 15th, which is in 2 weeks.
And that's going to be a longer meeting, so that'll be a 6 to 7 meeting. We
6
have
to
to
7.
do the audit at that time, as well as we want to have 2 months of financials that we'll need to go over with the group. So, just plan for an hour-long meeting that day.
Great. So those of you on the Finance and Facilities Committee, 6 o'clock. Excellent, thank you. Ed policy, next meeting it says here is December 22nd, but you've had a meeting prior. We have some first readings on the new business portion of the agenda. Someone on the Ed Policy Committee want to report out on that meeting, or?
Sure, that was the meeting on the 17th, I believe, yes. So we have 2 first readings and a policy to rescind tonight. The first being GCJ, that has a title change and some language changes to one section. The second being GCF, which is also for first reading tonight. We added some language around unconscious bias there and then had to renumber. And then GCF-R is a rescind because it's covered in GCJ, so it's an unnecessary policy now. We also reviewed policy GCOA. There was no changes, and again, we talked about the last meeting. If we reviewed and there was no changes, we didn't need to do a vote on it.
Right.
GBJ was also reviewed and there was no changes, and GBJC was reviewed and there was no changes.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll get to those first reads a little bit later. And then thirdly, the Wellness and SEL Committee met earlier this evening.
Yeah.
Please.
The focus tonight was on recycling and reducing our use of single-use plastics, particularly around food service. There were a couple of questions about what are the barriers to doing this more effectively, such as storage of all the material, and how do we implement it in a way that it's not overwhelming, because sometimes it feels like too much, especially if there's the teachers or the custodians have to handle all of the logistics of the stuff that we're trying to recycle. One of the big things right now is at Great Works, the kids have really, and it's wonderful, I love this, the kids have really come to Jerry and said, we want silverware and trays, and we want mugs when we have hot cocoa instead of all this stuff that gets thrown away. And they're really invested in it, and so they're trying to go back to trays and getting metal silverware and that kind of thing. And the other administrators have said, expressed an interest in doing the same thing. But it seems that most everyone is concerned about the amount of single-use plastic in our lunches right now, driven mostly by COVID, but now we've gotten to the point where it's like, well, what can we do to modify this and improve it? So Tony is going to look into what's available, and what offers pickups for the recyclables that would keep them from becoming overwhelming on each site, or keep, if you're trying to store cans and bottles that have residue in them, does that draw rodents and ants and things? So how can we manage all of the stuff? And what services are available, like Clink, Mr. Fox, any other ways to do this, and what the feasibility and costs are. But it seems like all the students, at the high school, I guess it needs to be revived. You guys can say there used to be a bunch of recycling folk, and now it's kind of, and trying to get that going again. And I personally think it'd be great. So I'm hoping that we'll get some good information back on that. And Jen, I don't know.
Yeah, one thing to add, also looking into what happens like when we put paper in the big bin or we put cardboard in the big bin and it does get taken away, is it really
Yeah.
getting recycled? So just closing the loop on what's actually happening.
The waste management place in, I think it's Rochester, they do a wonderful field trip and demonstration. They also, you can have people come into the classroom and do a lesson, and so if these students are really interested, I encourage the schools to, reach out for either a guest speaker from the waste management or a field trip, because it is fascinating. And then maybe take it a step further, where just looking at the gas that's powering like all of UNH and down that corridor, Route 16, is pretty fascinating from the waste. So anyway, thought I'd throw that out there.
Okay. Thank you both. Lastly, the advisory committee that is working on the board portion of the website continues to make progress.
It sure is. I found my policy handbook and was able to make some progress today.
That's great.
Thank you, guys.
Do we think there's content that we could consider putting up now and then build out the pages going forward, or do you feel like we should wait?
So we have that draft going, but I feel like it's sparse.
Okay.
It's sparse. I think maybe in a couple of weeks, when we get some more things laid out, we could probably publish the site.
Great.
Are you building it in the sandbox right now? Is that the?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. That concludes the report of the committees and brings us to the new business section. As was discussed, we have a small number of first reads. May I have a motion, please, to approve the first reading and discussion of policy GCJ?
I move to approve the first reading and discussion of policy GCJ, professional staff probation and continuing teacher contracts.
I'll second.
Thank you, Sue. This appears to have that one add around notification for,
So, yep, language change there, and number 4, and then the title change where it's highlighted continuing at the top.
got it. Any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor? That is 5-0. Thank you very much. May I have a motion, please, around GCF?
I'll move we approve the first reading and discussion of policy GCF, professional staff hiring.
I'll second, Jen.
Thank you, Jen.
One thing is in B, unconscious is spelled wrong.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
Just to clear that up quickly.
And this is something that we talked about, I believe, last spring, about adding this to part of our hiring process. So,
Yep.
So there'll be a training that everyone will go through. To be on a committee, excuse me.
The spacing in subsection A makes it very punchy.
And
Yeah.
D, the same thing.
Indeed, the same.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like the last line. There's something in the formatting that's giving
Mhm.
certain lines that kind of weird spacing.
Yep. Any other comments or questions? All in favor? That is 5-0. Thank you. And this last of the policies is a rescind on GCF-R. May I have a motion, please?
I move to rescind policy GCF-R, renewal and non-renewal of professional staff contract administrative procedure.
I'll second, Kate.
Kate, thank you. And again, this is just to remove a policy that is now covered by the previous policy.
Yep.
All in favor? That is 5-0. Thank you very much.
Can I just share something real quickly?
Certainly, of course.
I had a conversation with Maine School Management on Tuesday prior to our break, and they assured me that the summative report on our policies will be sent to us prior to the end of the end of the fiscal year, or excuse me, end of the calendar year, which will be really important. I think one of the things that I think we all struggle with is the way it's laid out on our website. It's very difficult to be able to track policies down in a logical way. So that's something that it's gonna have to take some time to do that, but that's something that we're working through right now. But that's in addition to having looked at the policies themselves.
Right.
So
Great.
we should have that by the end of the year.
Excellent.
Great, yep, great.
More work for the policy committee.
Yeah, that's Charlotte Bates will be doing that. So that will give us that, you know, punch list, so to speak, of the policies that
Right.
need to be reviewed and updated.
Makes sense. Okay, can I have a motion, please, with regard to the superintendent's contract?
I move to approve a 3-year contract to John S. Caverly, Superintendent of Schools, at a negotiated salary rate of $147,000 and benefits for 2022 to 2023.
Second, Heather?
Thank you, Heather. Any comments or questions? I will note that this document is the result of a hammering out process that the board went through in executive session, as is appropriate. And this is where we arrived. Comments or questions? Okay, all in favor? That is 5-0, thank you. Have a motion, please, with regard to the tax and revenue anticipation note.
I move we approve and authorize issuance of a tax and revenue anticipation note.
I'll second, Kate.
Kate, thank you very much. Any further questions for Ryan?
Did we have to do it in a certain language?
Oh, thank you.
I noticed that on the top of this.
Yeah, the actual note itself has a motion with more specific language than what is in the agenda, and you're right, I think the motion should have been made.
In that language, yes.
Yeah,
So I'll just read it.
So I would
Just read it again.
resend the
Yeah.
motion.
so,
Vote to resend.
yeah, let's,
Well, we didn't vote on it yet, so.
no, but the motion is on the table, we should rescind it. Can I have a motion to rescind the previous motion?
I move to rescind the motion to approve and authorize issuance of a tax and revenue anticipation note.
And have a
Second.
All in favor? And that's 5-0. And now, thank you,
New one.
Try that again.
let's try it again.
I move that the vote entitled, "Vote to authorize issuance of a $1,500,000 tax and revenue anticipation note be approved in form presented to this meeting, and that the secretary file an attested copy of said vote with the minutes of this meeting."
I will second.
Jen, thank you. And thank you for catching that. So, any further questions for Ryan? We're all clear as to what is being asked? In that case, all in favor? 5-0, thank you very much.
So we have to put that all on here. Right, I don't
Yes.
have an official
For
one.
signatures and,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and
Yep.
certification. Good, excellent.
Okay, great.
Okay, that concludes the new business portion of the agenda. We have our lower grades coming tonight for the building administrators check-in. I can't tell for sure, yep, I see. Good.
Hi, I just wanted, we did have our vaccine clinic the day before Thanksgiving break, and just thanking our nursing staff. It went extremely well, and of course, there's a little apprehension ever with shots in elementary school kids, but they were wonderful. The kids were amazing, the teachers were amazing, and I got to hold a few hands, but the kids were really proud of themselves, and it just went really well. So just a big thank you to all our staff for making that go so smoothly. And also just as Annabelle talks about the civil rights team, we also at Central, today we had about 30 third graders that stay after school on every other Wednesday. So they've been really doing a lot of work with welcoming the posters all around the school and talking today a lot about identity and heritage, and also the civil rights leader, Alana Crafty. Lisa O'Brien have been really educating the staff and talking about the holiday season and different things that we could be aware of. So it's really great to see that energy as well at Central. So thank you.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Good evening. I just want to celebrate the fact that Wreaths Across America, if you're familiar with that, will be coming to Elliott, Maine on December 13th at 10:15 a.m. So you don't want to miss it. You're invited. It's going to be an incredible experience. Wreaths Across America, they travel from Harrington, Maine, all the way to the Arlington National Cemetery. The convoy carries holiday wreaths to place at military gravestones to remember, honor, and teach about the values of our nation and our veterans who made the ultimate sacrifice. Really important experience for our children who will be participating actively in the ceremony. We'll have students who are going to be using sign language to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we're going to have students sing the Wreaths Across America song, led by our music teacher, Marissa McHugh Armitage. So we're really excited about that. I'd say a public thank you to Ann Schisler, who has coordinated Wreaths Across America. She's invested a great deal of energy and time in doing that. So thank you, Ann, for that. I would share with you that we have been partnering with the Elliott Lions Club and supporting Project Share. We did that around the Thanksgiving holiday, and we'll continue to do that through the winter holiday season as well. So kids are going to bring in non-perishables and canned goods and fill the boxes and get them to families that are in need. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sue stole my thunder. That was my other about the kids at the Great Works School coming in.
Sorry, but it was so great.
We need to talk ahead of time after this. But just the power of the kids. And again, I got a letter from Mel Morse's class, and they had been talking about this in class, and the kids were really ticked that how much plastic we were using. And it was because of COVID. But we've kind of, they said, isn't there a way that we can go back to using the old trays? We won't be throwing all that plastic away. And so we went to the cafeteria staff, and of course we could do that. And then, so we made that change. And then I had a student, and the kids did not want any publicity of this. It wasn't like, look at me, look at me. It was just like, this is the right thing to do. Then I had another student come to me, and in fact, I tried to get her to do the announcement the other day, but she wouldn't do it because she didn't want the attention. But she was like, we have walk to school, and we have hot chocolate when the kids walk to school. The other day, we threw away 150 styrofoam cups, and she was saying, Mr. Burnell, that's not right. We shouldn't be doing that. And can we do something else? So we're having a walk to school Friday, and we'll probably still throw away quite a few cups, but we're on a mission to get coffee mugs or hot chocolate cups for the school. We can store them at the school, so when we have an event like that, we can use cups instead of throw away. So if you have any extra mugs in your cupboards, I'll expect them in a couple of weeks when I'm back.
Good.
Okay. The other, Nina said, the vaccine clinic was unbelievable, and you have volunteer nurses. I mean, we had a bunch of volunteer folks come in to do this. The kids were great. The parents were great. It went much smoother than we ever expected. And then John talked about the play, and it was so nice to see the play back. And it's, you see the scenery and all the work that goes on, and it just, brings a warm feeling to your heart. I was talking with one of the kiddos after it was all done, and he told me, he said, I told him what a great job you'd done. And he said, I'm sad. And I said, you're sad, why? And he said, well, it's over. I always love the practices and the rehearsals and things like that. But he said, the thing I miss the most is the connections I made with the other kids, because we were like a team. And he said, especially the older kids, the middle school kids and the high school kids. So it's not just about the performance, it's about those, when we talk about connections. Thank you.
Mr. Burnell, I just wanted to say something real quick. I bet you if you took a poll of all the kids that went to Pinkham Notch with you, and you talk about recycling, I would say 80% would remember the word "ort." You know, so every time you talk about recycling at the Great Works Way, I always think of how they would measure the ort and make sure that they minimize the waste, and whoever had the least amount of waste, you know, was the winner.
Right.
And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
I always remember that, so.
Yeah.
Your lasting word is ort. How's that?
That's so true.
Thank you all. Any other last
Thanks, everyone.
observations from the board? Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Megan, thank you. All in favor? 5-0.
Great.
Thank you. We are adjourned.